Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and so we will call this meeting of the Canton Street Working Group to order. My name is Mary Ann LeBlanc. I'm a co-chair of this group along with Steve Rasky. It's great to see everyone. Thank you all for being here. We'll start with a roll call of the working group. I will call the roll. Steve Rasky. Just say present, if you would, for the record.
Okay.
Amy Gold.
Present.
Grace Doshi.
Present.
Gary Yasalian.
Present.
Maureen White.
Present.
Ed Driscoll.
Not here.
He is not here. Ellen Rawlings.
Present.
Tom McShane.
Present.
Todd Korchin.
Present.
Brendan Ryan.
Present.
Nora Loughnane. Not here, at least yet. Chief Lund is not with us. And Officer Baker.
Present.
Thank you very much. Well, it is great to see everyone, and for those of you who may be, I need to grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting. Thank you very much, Charlotte. And for those who may be tuning in or present for this meeting for the first time, this group has been meeting since January of this year. I asked Steve Rasky to co-chair this working group with me because he is a Canton Street resident and has been for nearly 40 years. And he also has a very distinguished record of service to the town, including as planning board chair for a number of years. And I also asked Steve to facilitate these meetings because he is a neighbor in the neighborhood. I just wanted to make a few introductory comments before we start tonight to remind folks that this working group was formed by the select board to provide input into a redesign of this project following the original 25% plan that was presented. And we have had a great deal of conversation since this group was formed, and this group here has worked very hard over the last 9 months. In addition, we have received many comments in writing, which we have read. We have listened to all of the conversation that's been had. We've read all of the comments, and we've really tried to incorporate the constructive feedback and comments that we've received. Tonight we have a hard stop for this meeting at 7:30 due to conflicts afterward. And it is possible, I just want to let folks know, it's possible we may not have time for public comment tonight, but we are going to have another meeting, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, which is going to be primarily focused on public comment. And what we'd like to do before we close tonight is have a conversation about that next meeting and see if we can try to schedule it tonight rather than the doodle polling that we've been doing with so much back and forth. I will say that this meeting has been very hard to schedule. We tried for a number of other dates over the summer, and we simply were not able to get a critical mass together. Given the fact that people are busy and they have lives outside of this working group, and you're all volunteers, so that's not meant as any criticism. It's just, it is what it is, and we're glad that we're here tonight. So the plan is that we will have this meeting available on Westwood Media Center, so people who are not here have time to digest it and then come to the next meeting, again, hopefully within the next few weeks, and be able to provide public comment. Also, we want to let folks know that they are certainly welcome to forward written comments to us. We know that some folks have trouble getting to these meetings given other family commitments and things on their plate. So if you would like anyone listening, watching, or here to submit written comments to Steve and myself, you may do so using the select board, I should say. I said selectmen because it's BOS is the email address, which is a remnant from when we called it the Board of Selectmen. But the address is, and we'll put it up later, bos@townhall.westwood.ma.us. Again, BOS, as in Sam, at townhall.westwood.ma.us. And that address will also be prominently featured on the Canton Street project webpage on the town website. So if you need the address again, it will be right there, and we welcome your comments. With all of that said, I will now turn it over to Steve Rapsky.
Thank you, and I'd like to note that Nora Luckname has joined us. Also at the table, John Rockwell from TEC.
Can you speak up a little, please?
I will try. Is that better?
Much better.
All right, and also at the table this evening, we have John Rockwell, who is normally with us, has a conflict from TEC, so filling in for him is Tom Quinlan, and he will help us with that. Also at the table tonight for the first time is Joe Cohn, and Joe Cohn is the landscape architect reviewing this project. And there's been questions about that, and we have something to show, so we asked Joe to join us tonight. So welcome to all three of you to our meeting. Also, since there is always someone new at the meeting, I would just like to make a couple of introductory comments. I'd like to give an update, but I'd like more talking from the people around the table than from me tonight. So first, I do want everyone to remember that our assignment, our mission, just as Mary Ann mentioned, was to make recommendations to the Select Board. And a lot of the calls that I receive, people think we are a granting authority. We are not the granting authority. We are an advisory group advising the Select Board. As I've said time and time again, I just want to reiterate it. As long as I've lived in this town, which hearing it's almost 40 years makes me feel old. I'd rather say 30-some years. But we've talked about a sidewalk since I've moved here. And it's never happened. It's never happened because there's never been funding for it. We also have talked about traffic calming for the whole time. Some things have been done for traffic calming, in my judgment, not enough. So to me, we always look, for many of us on Canton Street, we look at any project to provide non-vehicular access and safety. And that's what I believe this project's more about. If we can improve safety, improve traffic calming, and provide access, and when I say provide access, I'm talking about access from neighbor to neighbor. People across the town, that's not what this is about. This is about neighbors having access to neighbors, although it enhances all. So again, I look forward to an interactive meeting. To give a way of just an open update so everyone has it, on July 28th, I believe, Mary Ann and John and I met with DOT. It was July 8th, sorry. We called the meeting. The reason we called the meeting, to be very clear, we're on this project to make revisions to a plan. We wanted to negotiate up front what we could, or at least get an understanding, because we didn't want to come to the town and show a plan that we had no idea if we could ever get it approved. We agreed on many things that allowed us to greatly improve this plan, and that's what I want to focus on right now. What are some of the improvements? First of all, if you go back to the original plan that many of us, including me, were against, we had 61 walls that were impacted along one side of Canton Street. 24 of those walls were being moved or destroyed, moved more than 10 feet or destroyed. With the things that we negotiated with Mass DOT, we still do have 27 walls impacted. That's a huge difference, going from 61 to 27. And only 7 walls have a 10-foot variance or more. Personally, I'm not happy even though we have any walls that have 10 feet. But the good news is, of those 10, only 4 have really small frontages. So if we look at the impact from where we started, it's a very different project today. Now, what did we talk to Mass DOT about? We talked to them about having no more than an 8-foot shared path all the way through the project. This is one of the few times, matter of fact, in talking to the head engineer for the state for Complete Streets, he doesn't remember another project of 2 miles that they've agreed to so much. I maybe shouldn't say that publicly, but because I don't want them to change their minds. But we're pretty assured that if we had 8 feet and not the normal width all the way up and down this project, they're going to let that go. Even a bigger thing is that we have an agreement to remove buffer. And by removing buffer, we save another 2 feet. The real impact of that, oh, and another thing is, for traffic calming, they've agreed to be responsive to as many crosswalks as our engineers say are safe, but also that can help traffic calming situations. Because of that, 100% of this project is now in the right-of-way, where before it was heavily out of the right-of-way and needed a lot of eminent domain situations. Also, the road has been reconfigured to benefit as much as we could every resident along the road. So let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. And just so you know, I was not intending to go all the way through the plan from north to south. That's why we put the link out there. Hopefully people have looked at it. We'll be happy to look at anything any of you want to. But let me just point out some of the things that this process has brought us to. If we, for example, the grass buffer between Adams Street and 240 Canton Street, and I don't know, Tom, if we can show some of these or not, but I'm not, if it's a problem, don't worry about it.
What's on it?
Which is Weatherby Farm. We removed the grass buffer all the way through there, taking this project totally within the right-of-way, and having de minimis issues with the wall. If we look at just some other things, for example, we shifted the alignment 2 feet to the west from Courier Lane to Kilronan. And again, what it did is, without harming the western side of the street, it improved the eastern side of the street. We removed the grass buffer again from 396 Canton Street to Partridge Road, having the same kind of impacts. We shifted alignment only 1 foot west, because that's all the space we had from 371 Canton Street to Everett Street, but it saved 5 walls in the process. The Everett Street intersection was shifted as well, and allowed to realign the road to 485 Canton Street, also diminishing wall impacts. And the entire intersection has been redesigned to have a raised intersection for traffic calming. So if we look, there's a couple of, frankly, it might only be one. I want to say I saw that at 213 Canton Street is the one place I saw that may have a little impact on a wall that wasn't before. But virtually every other improvement took impacts away from walls. And as I already said, we're down to 7 walls that have 10 feet. Let me put that in perspective. Most of the wall movements are less than 5 feet now. and about a third are 5 to 10 feet, and very few are over 10 feet. I believe listening to neighbors is what influenced the process to me. What I was hearing from neighbors reduced the impact on walls. That's why we went back to Mass DOT. I got to be candid, I didn't think we were going to have as good a meeting at DOT as we did. But they were totally cooperative, and my hat's off to that team. So that's why we went to DOT. I can tell you that the plan that we have before us today is a plan. I'm not saying that it can't be improved. I'm not saying what everyone feels. I'm saying it's a deliverable plan. And it's a plan that will provide a shared use path up and down Canton Street. Now, what does that look like? The one thing that we have not done is really focused on the materials. I'm an advocate, if we end up doing a project, to make it blend in as much as we can. You can do it with material, you can do it with color, you can do it with landscaping. But something I asked Joe to do is, since he was offered to be here, is to show what we're talking about a little bit. Now this is, let me be very open. We cannot, or Joe cannot, right now, replace trees with what's going to look like, because we're not that far along in the plan. But what he did do is take a look and try to show a couple of treatments that we're talking about so people can visualize what this kind of a project looks like. So Tom, can we show those? Do you have them?
Yep.
And then I'm going to open it up for the group to start discussing. So as you can see, this is a view. If you can go to the top for the first one.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So this is a view from Courier Lane looking south. This is today's view. If we put in the type of treatment that I just described, if you go to the next slide, this is what the path would look like with a buffer at a crosswalk. It shows you the feel of the width of the path and what it does. Now, in fairness, the trees, some of those trees would not be there and would be replaced. So this is not trying to show what happens to the treescape. It's trying to show what a path would look like that we're talking about. If you can go to the next slide. I think we also have to remember that part of the year, it looks a little different than when the leaves are in bloom. No, that's the slide. So we need to understand that during a good part of the year, we don't have a lot of foliage that protects view. We have a lot of empty trees. And I wish it wouldn't happen because I have a lot of trees and I'm already starting to pick up leaves. But I won't make it personal. If we can go to the next slide. This is at Aaron Road, also looking south. This is an area that's tight. There would be no buffer. And what Joe did, that one large tree, which will become obvious, he did remove because we know that is in the right-of-way. Or not in the right-of-way, but in the project way. And if you go to the next slide. Now, there would be something replacing that and with time would grow, but we just wanted people to see what this is talking about if you were walking down the street with a widened view for this path. You will notice that there's no buffer here. We saved 2 feet there. You'll notice that walls are placed back in front of houses. Again, we could change the material to lessen the impact. We can change the color to lessen the impact. But that's in the next wave of this is going forward. That's not for our purview today. But I want to pause there. I hope we can at least agree that a lot of progress has been made. And I think it's fair to say there's, within the boundaries we have, we're getting close to where we're at the maximum of what we can do. Now, did you want to add anything, or did I cover that okay?
I just wanted to mention there are some seats up front. People are looking for a seat. But no, go ahead, Steve.
Joe, did you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did I cover that okay, or do you have anything to add about
I think
landscaping?
you did a great job, yep.
Okay. And Tom, was there anything in particular that you felt we should show before we turn it up to discussion?
No, not necessarily. You did a great job.
Well, thank you. Would you call my wife?
I will. I will.
So with that, I'd like to open it up to comments, questions to the working group. And
Just a question to clarify. You mentioned a raised intersection, which I think you meant throughout the whole street, right?
well,
Can you
no,
explain that a little bit
the
more?
major intersection is the Everett Street intersection.
Oh, okay.
But also anywhere there's a crosswalk, there will be a raised crosswalk, which
Okay.
will also be a way to slow traffic down.
Okay.
I'll start.
Okay,
So,
time's up.
we worked, you and I worked together, right? Yeah, thank you.
You get a 3-minute time.
We worked on this together most of the, throughout the spring, the summer, early morning meetings, et cetera. I'm glad you talked to the DOT, but I would like to see if we could do a little bit more of a hybrid design. And I think that design right there with the 8-foot path is very urban looking for the area. And I would negotiate a 5-foot sidewalk with a buffer and just have the buffer be called part of the path if need be. So that way, we have a sidewalk, it looks a little more aesthetic, but it doesn't look so urban. And right now, my concern is, even though it shows no cars on the street, they're whizzing by at 45, 50 miles an hour. You don't want to be that close on the edge of the sidewalk when a car is going by that fast. And the other one is, I would like to see a design, similar design that crosses 53 driveways, because this is like another lane for residents to cross. They have to watch for pedestrians on both sides while trying to get in and out of a busy street. So it's a safety issue, I think, for the users of the path, as well as the residents getting access to the road. That is my biggest concern. And the other one is, we do have to look at tree impact on the topographical views. The trees were removed so we could see the road, because the trees provide a lot of shade, so it doesn't look like there's impact. But there's a lot of canopies along Canton Street that we have to be mindful of, and we should probably mark those trees that are going to be impacted. We're not going to get it 100% with the, by marking it, but we can at least see probably 80% impact, and at least have an idea as to what changes are going to be coming forth. So those are my initial comments.
Thank you. And let me just update you on one, because at your suggestion, I did reach back to DOT.
Oh, thank you.
And just for the record, they will not go below 8 feet.
It's 8 feet, it's just,
Wait a minute, let me
looks
finish.
different.
I went as far to say, because I'm going to be very, maybe I should keep some of this confidential, but I don't care. That's why I don't get paid to do this. I specifically also asked them, I said, we have some pinch points. There's a few houses that I do believe have more impact, 4 in particular, than others. And they came back today to say they just cannot approve it under this program. So
That's a shame.
I'm just
Yeah,
telling
that's a
you,
shame.
that's the response.
Okay.
So we are left, in my opinion, with either having a project like this or not having a project like this, but not coming up with iterations lower than this. Again, with treatment, with materials, with landscaping, there's a lot of things we can do. But to go below, that's why I wanted to show what it looks like, for fairness to everybody. And the point that the key engineer said to me today, he said, here's the thing that you got to understand. if there's a 5-foot sidewalk with a bicycle, and there's one pedestrian and one bicycle, there's no room to get by. And they just won't, it's just not in their program, and they will not.
But
I'm
in-
just telling you where they are.
Okay, but in our planning meetings with Nora, we talked about even a 3.5-foot sidewalk, and every 200 feet, you need a 5-foot relief, right, to allow for the passing, and we have that with all the driveways.
Right. I'm just saying that's not in this is a complete street program that this funding is under. I'm saying either we go with something like this as a town, or we don't have a project, but there's no negotiating for something less than.
I'll make my last comment, and I'll defer to the rest of the floor. But what we didn't do was, we just put in a sidewalk, so the town expected a sidewalk, not a project of this magnitude or scale. It was positioned as a sidewalk, it still is, right? So that was the expectation. But we just put in a sidewalk on Downey Street. Why didn't we make that a bike path?
I wasn't
Right,
involved, I
so
don't know.
I think
What was
we're definitely, we're definitely
The only thing I will
chasing
say
the
here, and
funding.
I don't know, and I'm not debating you.
I know that.
I don't have an answer, but I can just tell you that's not a complete street funded project where this would be.
All right, so the funding, if the funding is determining the design, not the design, what's best for the town. So we,
Or the neighborhood,
right, so,
yes.
Well,
I'll
I
pause
would
there.
say this, in my opinion, this is ideal. If you go to 5.5 feet, and the reason it's ideal is because it takes into account the neighbors and the stone walls and all the adjustments that have been made to preserve the walls and the character of the street.
but you haven't looked at
Hold on, hold
you haven't
on,
looked
hold
at the trees though, Tom.
Just hear me out, right? Steve's right. I live on Pine Lane. We have a 5.5-foot sidewalk. There, if you have two people walking by with dogs going in the opposite direction, and there's no buffer, like it's just not wide enough for people to comfortably navigate it. And then you put kids on bikes going to school or wherever. It is tight. I mean, it sounds 5.5 feet might sound great, but when you start talking about bi-directional traffic, it's really not a lot. So I think, in my opinion, this is great because it is better than a sidewalk, but also preserves the walls and has minimal impact in the neighborhood. And I will say, yes, trees are impacted in the canopy, right? But I've gone down Canton Street a lot. There are some trees that are long overdue to be removed there. So you could make a case, they're dying. They look horrendous. And you could make a case that this is part of maintenance and upgrading the trees as well.
Well, your design, opinions on design are subjective. I do feel that this is a very urban-looking design and is out of character of a bucolic country road, right? So you have a lot of concrete there, a lot of material. You're adding probably 50% more material to the road. You have a lot of cooling effect from the trees, a lot of shade, a lot of nature, and this is just turning it into a
It'll look like
Greater Boston type of
universities.
road. That's exactly, like, you wouldn't do this on a Gay Street or a Clapboard Tree Street or a Hartford Street, right? You can't just treat Canton Street as a guinea pig because there's money. Would you do this on other roads in town that are scenic in nature? And you should use that as the litmus test and then say, I can take this design and then adapt it to these other roads. Not to say, we need to fix Canton Street because there's money and they're only going to pay for it if we do this. You need to take that into consideration in how we make those recommendations.
You do-
What's good for Canton Street needs to be good for the rest of the town.
Yep.
That's it.
So there, you do recognize we could put a 2-foot buffer here, and the reason we're not, right, is because we don't want to infringe on neighbors'
My recommendation
space,
is that we do the buffer, we go back and renegotiate with the DOT, and you use the buffer to say, that can be used as a passing area, an extension, et cetera. But I think that a buffer would look a lot better, even with the same real estate that we're taking here. If we put in a buffer, with a 5-foot sidewalk or a 2-foot buffer or whatever it may be, it'll look a lot more bucolic, and you can still walk along the buffer.
Okay, it's an argument about, it's a
It's a
difference of
design
opinion,
aesthetic.
functional versus aesthetic.
I can-
And we have to choose one or the other, because if you want to go aesthetic, right, the DOT is not.
I say you can do both, and you argue it with the DOT. You can make a functional design that's aesthetic and still probably negotiate that with the
So let me-
DOT. I'll pause there.
Okay.
So let's, yeah, first of all, I don't know if, Joe, if you have any comments about,
Yeah, just to weigh in on the trees. In these simulations up here, you have a lot of older trees that are impacted by
speak
power
up,
lines.
yes.
Is this a microphone?
That won't project, that's for the video.
Is that better?
Well, I don't care what's for, it's
Okay,
hard to
we'll
hear.
try that.
Yeah. So I was just saying, in regards to the trees in these simulations, in that section of road, some of the maples, they've been heavily trimmed by the power companies, not trimmed in a nice way either. Those trees, I think, you could replace that with a 4-inch caliber tree that's already 25 feet tall. As far as the heat island effect in that space, you can add plantings to, mimic what you have there. I'm not saying it's a 50-foot tree right away, but looking to the future, I think that scenario can be mitigated there. Going further, I guess that would be south, you get into the large oak trees, things like that. Those trees, they're shedding branches, but otherwise they're pretty healthy. In that area, it might be a little bit more difficult to achieve full canopy in, let's say, 10 to 15 years. But in this particular area, I think, you could solve that issue.
In your design aesthetics, are you also doing like a budgeting for it as well, in terms of this, like a swag, in terms of what it may possibly cost?
As far as
Like aesthetic treatments, right?
Yep.
Tree replacement, whatever, shrubbery, whatever it may be. And then, to Steve or the board or whatever, is that cost then included in the DOT budget, or is that a cost that the town will have to bear? Like, so my question is, when we look at all the things that can be, who's covering those costs? Will it be covered both by the town and the DOT, or the DOT is gonna cover everything in order to accommodate 100% of what we want to achieve?
So first, the first part of the question is, I don't think Joe is doing anything to assess that because it's not at that point yet.
Okay.
But the second part of your question is, we did talk to DOT about that. They would expect that there would be wall replacement and landscaping that would be normal with a project like this, that they would expect to be covered by the project. They also warn that if we get excessive, then the town may have to contribute.
And what
But-
are they considering excessive, though?
They didn't have examples, but I'm just saying they are anticipating that the landscaping that a normal project would ask for would be covered under the grant. And they just let us know if we materially change, they didn't give examples, it's just, if it's within a norm, and that's what guys like Joe know, then they would expect it to be covered by the grant. If it's excessive, then that's the term they use, then it would be something that we'd have to make a decision. They would let us know what they feel is excessive, and then we would be negotiating at that point.
Okay.
How do you replace a tree that's 100 to 200 years old that's very healthy? If that had to be taken down, what would you do in a scenario like that? Because there are a fair amount of trees that are in pretty good shape, that really have got good caliber to them, and they look beautiful, and they shade the tree, shade the street, and they're beneficial for the environment and for the neighborhood.
Yeah, there are, admittedly, a lot of very nice trees, very large oak trees.
Yep.
I'm not going to sit here and say we can cut those down and poof, it'll be right back to a canopy. It's just not going to happen, but,
Speak louder.
you can plant 4 or 5 inch caliper trees that are 25, 30 feet tall. In years coming, it will get to that point, but you're talking 10, 15 years down the road.
Have you ever been down to University Station and seen
Yes.
those All right, so that is how many years later than when those trees were planted there? What, 10 years?
10.
10 years? Do you see how small those are right now? What type of tree would you be?
Yeah, I would
You could.
replace, similar in kind to what what we see in this picture, a lot of the red maples, sugar maples up in this area. I would replace with those types of trees.
And what size would they be? Small, like
Yeah, they'd be,
height-wise?
4-inch caliper trees, like I said, it's 20 to 25 feet tall.
Okay.
In 5 to 10 years, you can expect that to be another 6 to 7
I'm okay
feet
with
tall.
I'm okay with that.
Similar to
Big tree is a big tree.
the lower area,
Big tree.
where there's, more of a oak
Just gotta water.
stand there, you could replace those with other, pin oaks, white oaks, things like that, you could have
Up
similar
quick.
coverage in a quick time.
I'd like to also point out, since you mentioned University Station, many of the trees along University Avenue were designed to be small trees because they're near the street. But if you look back in the neighborhoods, around where the houses are and around where the aquifer system is, those trees are 30 feet tall now that were planted and have filled in very nicely.
And the side on the opposite where University Station are the businesses, those trees have been there, I'm assuming, a fairly long period of time so that they look and appear healthier. Because those trees that are on that university, they don't look very healthy.
Well, some of them have died, but that's because of the way that was, it's the type of tree, but they were never designed to be a tree that was a big tree. That's the only point I was going to make.
Because that's very, it's not aesthetically pleasing whatsoever.
I agree.
And I would not expect that for Canton Street to ever have to look like that. And that is an 8-foot shared use path.
We wouldn't have a planting plan that would have those issues. I can't speak to whoever designed that, but.
But those trees would be behind the 8-foot shared use path. So you would essentially see all that and then the trees behind it, behind the stone walls that you have to replace.
When you say all that, are you saying the views inward to the houses?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could screen, can we go back to go up one more, that one right there? Nope, that one.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. So that's, your view, call it 5 months out of the year. A lot of those trees are 4-inch caliper, smaller, things like that. As those get removed, obviously there'll be more views inward. People lose some privacy. That can be addressed. We can have low growth, we can have coniferous trees, things of that nature that could block those views. That's things that could be addressed further into the design process. I think the crux of the issue here is the right-of-way width. What's this going to look like? As far as landscaping, screening, street trees, canopy trees, those are solvable problems.
Could you go back to the aesthetic design, the one that shows the full path? What I see missing here are all the utility poles along the path.
On
Like-
one portion, it is
Well, they
on
wouldn't
the
be
west.
utility poles in the path.
Well, I don't, I mean, we have a lot of
This
utility.
particular view, it's on the west side of the street. The poles are. Where their poles are on the eastern side of the street, obviously, they're going
Okay.
to be moved.
Another negotiation we need to do,
Is the other section, what side of the street are they on the other section?
They're on.
Yeah, go
they're-
to the
So
top
those
there.
poles would be moved. In this particular spot, they wouldn't be moved because there's a buffer there.
but that's the buffer, right?
Right, but some of those poles would be moved if there's not a buffer. And that's the balance between buffer and no buffer is in this section.
With respect to pole movement, we have to talk to Eversource or the other utilities, because in our discussions with Nora, they would just put a new pole in, cut the old pole, piggyback the old pole onto the new pole, and that would be unsightly for 2+ years. So there needs to be, the utilities take forever to transfer a pole. There needs to be something done that it's done automatically, or else we're gonna have something that's unsightly for many years.
Right.
Yeah.
I know we're not at the point of doing so many of these things. You know, we're at a theoretical point. Do we want to try to get a project on the ground or not? Our assignment, you know, what we are talking about now, this is not. We're allowed to have a say. So, with all due respect, we're going to have plenty of time for public comment. If it's not tonight, as Mary Ann said, it'll be at our next meeting. This is a critical discussion to see where we're going. But our assignment is not a granting authority. There's a lot of if the Board of Selectmen takes this revision and they say, we see that there's something here, we're going to continue this process. That's when you do all the engineering, you do the pole movement, you do all the things that we're talking about tonight. Then there is the time to say, do we have a project that's right? I understand the sensitivity. I live on this street. I'm going to make some comments that people are going to disagree with now. This street's been around, George, you know, this used to be a market, a farm-to-market street, right? There were horses, there were no houses like you see here except for 5. If you were a farmer living there 200 years ago, you would have been fighting what we have today. We have to, in planning, you plan for the future. I don't know how long I'm going to be in my house, but I do know I want to do whatever I do, I want to protect the sellability of my house. And I think a project like this makes my house more sellable, not less sellable.
That may not be.
So I'm just saying, we have to, at this point in the process, we could be debating, am I all wet or am I right? That's not what it's about. We're here to say, we've been asked to look at a plan, make revisions, and go back to the select board with, here's what we think you could do, and it's up to the next part of the process to finish the process. Let us see what it is, and there'll be plenty of time to say, should this go to an approval or not? So we're ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
I would think that we should go forward to get to the point that people can visualize what it is and then have an intelligent conversation. And just like I did the last time as a resident and a neighbor, if I think it's bad, I'm going to go back and fight it. Okay? I proved that I did that once. But right now, I'm trying to fight a process. I'm not fighting a project. And that's what I'm asking us all to do.
Steve, if I could add to that, and I want to comment on something you said, Gary. You said, you know, why are we not doing this on other streets? So just so we're all on the same page, we have a comprehensive plan in Westwood, and a very large value in that plan is connectivity of the entire town. So much like your kids on Canton Street couldn't walk down the street to see their friends, you know, my kids living off Gay Street couldn't go up Gay Street to
Right.
go to town, to come here to see their friends. They could only get to the Hanlon, and that was it. So, you know, I think we would all like to see connectivity in the town that adds to accessibility for kids, for all of us, sustainability, being able to walk or bike. And, you know, I don't want to get into Gay Street. This is the Canton Street group. But when we looked at Gay Street years ago, the state said, well, it's got to be on 2 sides, right? Now, working on this as a community, coming up with the plan, getting concessions and waivers from the state, you know, we may now have a model that can be used in other streets.
I agree with
in
you.
town.
I agree with you, and my point is, the design should be such that we can take it and adapt it to other streets, not, this is what the DOT wants. It may not be the prettiest thing, but they're gonna pay for it, and we don't apply it to other streets. It should be a 80% type of design that's adaptable, right, to
That's what
other
I'm
streets.
saying.
Yeah.
We may
So
have
fine,
an
we're on the same
adaptable
page.
plan.
Yeah, but I mean, it needs to be we need to refine this design further so it can fit in the other scenic roads and bucolic roads that we have in town.
And, you know, as Steve said, this is conceptual. We're getting all this input on the redesign before it's actually done, before we get it back. And this has been an amazing process, and we are going to have public comment. I know we've got to end tonight's meeting at 7:30. Maybe we'll have time for it, but we're going to have a whole meeting that's going to start with public comment. We want to accommodate people, and we're going to leave time at the end of this meeting to talk about timing, so that we have that. But
And when is that meeting going to take place?
we're going to discuss that tonight, sir. At the end of this meeting, we've got a couple of dates in mind, but we need to see what their availability is. Pardon me? All meetings have to be public, absolutely. All, these are public meetings. We have, some of you know, an open meeting law. So committees like this cannot meet without the meetings being posted and open, transparent, and we go to the extra step of making sure they've all been recorded by Westwood Media Center. I see the hands are going up. We're going to limit this right now to the working group, and then if we have time, open it up to the public.
So I'd like to go around the, well, if you.
Oh,
go ahead.
you can-
No,
we
no,
can
no,
go around.
Go ahead, your hand came up.
Yeah,
so
I
said.
was just
And then
gonna
something.
say
Did you have a hand up?
I did.
Okay.
thank you for getting to this point. I love that we can visualize it. I love this plan. I've, since day one, been talking about, as much as I love trees and preserving nature and preserving the beauty of Canton Street, safety is the most important thing. I have 2 young kids, 5 and 3 years old. They have friends that live on Canton, on Partridge, on Erin. They're inaccessible. We cannot get there. Even pushing my 2-year-old in a stroller down to Erin Road is scary. I'm a runner. I put my life in my hands when I run on Canton Street, and there's been many times where I had to veer off the road, even though I'm running in that teeny tiny yellow line. I'm sorry, the white line. I'm running off onto the cobblestone or somebody's grass because people are texting while they're driving. I love the fact that we can be adding crosswalks. I live on Hedgerow Lane, and there's like a turn that is sort of blind. So when I race across the street with my kids on their bikes to get over to Hemlock, sometimes cars whiz around, and it is frightening. So I look forward to the idea of crosswalks and raised crosswalks for the traffic calming. I know we got the traffic calming study and saw that the traffic actually has not increased. However, Nora, love the stats on how Everett Street, given the addition of those speed humps, have reduced the traffic on that street. And I think it would be a deterrent for somebody who's on 95 who gets the Waze notification. If they go on Canton Street once and they're going over humps and going up to 40 and back down to 10, they're not going to want to drive on Canton Street. So I'm excited about that. As I said, I'm a runner. And I also just love the idea of having the ability to walk to my neighbors. And I know, Gary, you had mentioned something about residents now having to look before they back out of their driveways for people. I hope that people are already doing that to begin with, right? Because I run on that street, my kids bike on that street, but I hear what you're saying.
Bidirectional traffic now on the sidewalk.
Understand, but it's not the Minuteman bike path in Lexington. It's residents walking to friends' houses or feeling comfortable standing on Canton Street when waiting for Gary, please let me finish.
Sure.
Waiting for the bus. I just think that I think that there's actually a lot of people that are in these pictures, right? I don't know if there will necessarily be this many people in this area, in the areas at the same time. But I do think that that's not a super strong.
E-bikes can go 20 to 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, understand.
E-bikes have to be on the street.
E-bikes have to be on the street, and
It has to be enforced.
I understand, I totally hear you, but I don't think we're gonna be getting a slew of e-bikes flying through a 2-mile shared use path because of where we are. Again, we're not gonna draw people from all over town to come hang out on the path on Canton Street, right? So I do just think from a neighbor perspective, being able to walk to University Station, walk to Islington, that would be an amazing thing, or just honestly walk safely across the street to Hemlock would be, a
sidewalk.
victory for us.
A sidewalk.
A sidewalk.
A
is
sidewalk.
adequate.
But I have two kids that are going to be biking, right? My mom's in a wheelchair. I would love to be able to walk with her, not just down Hedgerow Lane and back. I would love to be able to walk with her down the street or safely take her around.
Not to interrupt, it's not a, let's not debate.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry,
fine.
just sharing my,
No, no,
just
no,
sharing
no,
my,
I know.
my
I will
POV.
let Amy speak, and then
Yeah,
we'll let the
thank
next
you.
person
So
speak.
I understand, and I am all for making choosing the materials that blend in, that are beautiful with the landscaping. Like, I'm 100% for that. I love the street, but if it and I love trees, but if it means safety and comfort and peace of mind, knowing that I'll feel comfortable with my kid walking down the street 3 houses to a friend's house, like that is game changing. And I am the next generation. Like, I'm gonna be here for the next 30+ years, hopefully. And then Steve, just to your point about increasing property value, I talk to a lot of young families who really, really wanna move to Westwood. They really don't wanna move onto a street like Pond or Canton because the traffic is fast, and it's, unless they have a massive backyard, right? And so that's a deterrent. So knowing that there would be a potential for a sidewalk and connectivity and safety is much more appealing. So I do want to share that is a common conversation that I have a lot with my peers who are either looking to upgrade out of their starter home or move from another town.
Thank you. Ellen?
Thank you.
So I've been kind of thinking about this process with parallel paths. I don't use the word path because I don't want to construe parallel tracks of thought. Based on our conversations at the beginning, I thought we were kind of looking at a solution that would qualify for complete streets funding, which this would. And I think this is a vast improvement over anything we've seen so far. But I think I'm hearing there's still concerns. But we were also, and I've also been thinking in terms of a path, a track, a plan that wouldn't necessarily qualify for funding, but that might be a compromise that we could actually get done and that wouldn't make a significant number of residents uncomfortable. And I haven't seen any design of that. It sounds like we're not really pursuing anything. And let me ask, I'll tell you why I'm asking this. Because we've heard from the get-go, there's going to be some costs associated for the town with this. There's going to be an ask for money over and above any funding we get. And I've been kind of interested, and I know it's too early in the process, but if we have any indication at all from other towns who have done something like this, if there is any towns that have done something like this, of what the cost to the town would be over and above any funding we get to do this versus what it would cost to do something outside of complete streets. And my follow-on question to that is, someone mentioned Downey Street sidewalk. As I recall, there was some funding for that. I don't think it was complete streets.
We didn't pay a penny, but for Downing Street sidewalk.
Okay.
That was funded through the Complete Streets program that the state offers. So we were offered an opportunity to apply for up to a $350,000 grant. And basically what that allowed us to do is you could use it for a sidewalk, you could use it for any pavement infrastructure improvements, pedestrian accommodations, so on and so forth. We decided to use that for a sidewalk exclusively. We could have done that for Canton Street, but a $350,000 investment for a sidewalk on Canton Street would have probably gotten you from where it
Same
stops at-
distance, yeah.
Right, so where are you going with that 350,000?
Right.
And that
How much-
too was the Complete Streets program offered by the state of Massachusetts. This is a TIP program. It has a Complete Streets ideology, and Tom, correct me if I'm saying anything out of line, but Complete Streets ideology is to incorporate pedestrian, both foot and bicycle accommodations. So it's a mindset, but not to be confused with the actual state program that the state of Massachusetts offers, so.
Just to follow up, Todd, how much, of the 350, what percentage did that cover on Downey Street? The whole thing, or just?
Yeah, I want to say it was close to 100%.
Okay.
I mean, we might have used miscellaneous Chapter 90.
But
just
it
for
was
some-
it was
Yeah,
a
I would say
significant portion.
Well over 95%, if
Okay,
not 100.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful, because I think
Very.
I've heard some confusion about the difference. We're using the term complete streets,
Right.
perhaps not appropriately in this context. So that's an important distinction, thank you. But I guess I still would be interested in getting a sense of the differential in those costs. I know, not tonight, I'm just putting it out there from my decision-making process, same as I'm happy we're having the conversation about the trees, because I know I ask at every meeting, and I know I get the same answer. And the reason I keep asking is not because I don't understand, but it's because to make an informed recommendation that I feel confident in, that I've vetted properly, those data points are helpful. So I'm glad we're having that conversation now with a little bit more eye to it than we were. I think those were my only questions. Thanks.
Any other, can we just go around and see if there are any observations or anything? Todd, I'll just start there. Grace raised her hand.
I would echo comments by pretty much everybody here and probably sentiments from the general public. Gary, I do agree with you. In a perfect world, if the state and the program itself was flexible enough to accommodate what you're saying, I think the entire community as a whole would 100% agree. I think what Steve is saying, unfortunately, I want to say we're at the wall. I mean, I don't think you're going to get them to bend any further.
Yeah.
I also want to just quickly, again, hate bringing up the Gay Street comparison, but when we looked at opportunities from a funding perspective, in the reality of one versus the other, be it one, the potential of the town possibly funding it versus not, Gay Street was that candidate to say, at the time that we actually pursued the design and completed it, it was somewhat palatable, not like $6 or $7 million at that time was palatable, but it is certainly more palatable and reasonable for the community to possibly come up with that funding to complete Gay Street sidewalk versus how palatable would it be for the community to come up with $20 million or high teens of millions of dollars to do Canton Street. So I want to say that's why that this isn't necessarily the poster child of why we pursued the specific funding mechanism that we did, but in reality, it was looking at the two options. And we're still in hopes that at some point in time, the town does entertain the possibility of finding a funding mechanism to pursue Gay Street. It's designed, it's completed, but with respect to this project, with all the things on the horizon financially with the community, I think it's a tough ask to say, yeah, one day we'll come up with, say, $17, $18 million. And unfortunately, every year that goes by, with cost rising and rising, it's just like Gay Street. It started as a $6 million ask, and now today it's probably $8.5 million.
The cost of this, the project was scoped out at 20, we'll use 20 million as a number, right? And that was on the original design of the 10-foot path plus the 5-foot sidewalk. Now that we're gonna probably do, say, 40% less, right? Because we're only gonna do treatments on one side of the street with a construction. Do we still feel it's 20 million, or do we feel that?
By the time this gets, if it gets approved and we finish the process, we're told it's going to be more than what we have now, even with this design. It's not going to be less, it's going to still keep the ticket prices going up. So, and it's just because of the time and as prices go out. This would not, as I understand it, if everything was in a perfect world,
Right.
it's still 8 to 10 years before this happens. And prices aren't going down.
Okay.
That's what we're
Thank you.
being told. So, again, I don't, in fairness, I don't think anyone's looked and said, here's the price of one versus the other. But we've asked the question several times. We keep hearing there's not a material savings to do a sidewalk versus what we're talking about
Okay.
here.
Did you just say 8 to 10 years before you thought this would,
8 years, yeah, that's what I'm being told.
So has it gone off the tip for 2028?
I thought we were talking in like 2 years. This
But-
was,
It's on for 2028. Yep, 2028. That means it has to be done, has to be advertised.
Okay, so 2028. So, all right,
So
so
4
that's
years.
good news. So I'm wrong. Maybe I will be able to see it if there's a project.
I'm gonna record
Brenda,
that.
did you have?
I would just echo what's been said. I mean, I think the safety, and I think overall, it's done a great job working with the community of the impacts. I think important to note too, for a lot of residents on this street is utilities are getting upgraded as well.
no, I've
No.
checked into that. The water, no,
Eversource.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's false. That's been stated many, many times. I checked with the sewer department. The sewer department is not gonna
Telephone
update
calls.
the sewer lines. The water department will update the water lines. They're currently 8-inch cast iron lines. The Dedham Westwood Water District will replace them. That comes at the cost of the ratepayers. The project, the DOT funding does not cover infrastructure costs.
What about the
That
drainage?
is-
The drainage, it was
is gonna be
never
upgraded.
sewer, it was
There's
never
dra-
sewer, it was
I don't
drainage.
see since Todd was able to do the paving, I've gone up and down Canton Street in many rainstorms. I don't see a drainage issue.
I could give you a couple, but I mean, I'm
Okay.
just saying, that's one benefit
One
to
is
this,
funny,
that the drainage.
but I mean, we say infrastructure, people think that it's all infrastructure, it doesn't include that. I need to be clear on that, because I've done my homework on it.
Okay. Overall, I think it's done a great job of working with the community to minimize impacts. I do deal with drainage issues with phone calls from residents, so I think that'll be a big benefit to this quarter. And I think overall, just the safety component of it is huge.
Tom, did we miss anything?
You guys nailed everything. You know, on the funding piece, you have to remember with Mass DOT, there's a difference between complete streets funding and TIP funding. TIP funding has to follow the state's transportation policy. And their policy is that for their projects that are funded by Mass DOT and the Federal Highway Department, Federal Highway usually pays for 80%, state pays for 20% of the construction costs. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Funding?
Yes,
Funding.
sorry, I'm excited. Their policy is that the roadway needs to be designed for all users, whether that be pedestrians, whether that be vehicles, whether that be bicyclists. It needs to be, and if there were buses on this, even buses, but there aren't buses on Canton Street, so we don't have to worry about that.
There are.
Yeah.
We're talking about
School
public
buses.
buses, not
Oh,
school
public,
buses.
okay.
Like MBTA
School
buses, not
Got it,
school
got it,
buses,
got
not school buses. But we need to, as an engineer, and I've been an engineer for almost 20 years, I know I only look like I'm 18, but I'm 20 years now. These are the things that we have to think about and we have to adhere to when it comes to Mass DOT TIP projects. And yes, maybe the cost is 10 million, maybe the cost is 20 million, maybe the cost is 30 billion. Again, we're not there yet. We're looking at this from the 3,000-foot level. We're trying to get down to the 300-foot level, and then we'll get to the 30-foot level. Then we'll get to the 3-foot level. But that's our goal in time.
Yeah, just to echo that, I just feel like we keep saying, like, let's, find the money elsewhere, but I feel like the criteria that the DOT has in place is for a reason, for safety and accessibility. We've been able to already make some compromises, so I feel like some of that stuff is important so that everybody can use the sidewalk in a safe fashion. And I think as a committee, we have a responsibility to propose a fair plan with the least amount of impact, and that's from where it started. This is hugely different. It's one side, it's much smaller. I think it's, scaled back tremendously. If we continue to cut back more and whittle away more, then there really just won't be a plan at all. I also think aesthetics are subjective. I think a lot of people try to use it as an argument, as I think this is a scenic street, but to me, people walking on the street and biking is actually a beautiful thing to see. Since we met last, I've had to shimmy my way up and down to visit my 8-month son's grandparents on Courier Lane from Adams to Courier. I've had to do that trip and with my son in his stroller several times, which should be a very simple, easy trip to make, but it's not. I'm scared every time we go. My heart's beating so fast. I am on the street every single day. I've seen somebody walking on the street in some fashion or other. We almost hit somebody who was just walking from the Rotary the other day. So I think that we're losing a sight of the core of the issue, which is safety and accessibility. We continue to really get bogged down in the details with the walls and the trees, which are very important, and that's what we're looking at to get it covered with funding, and we're looking at ways to make it look pretty and replace the trees. But I do think we have responsibility to this town to do the right thing, so I can go to the birthday party at our friend's house on Blue Hill, which we also walk to regularly. So that's what I would like to be able to do with my family and the future of this town. So, yeah, I've even seen some, you know, since this, our last meeting, I've even seen let alone people walking on the street, I've seen scary incidences where a biker followed, you know, a car onto Adams Street yelling profanity because the car almost hit him. So these kind of things are happening every day. I know people all have their own stories and anecdotes and think that nobody walks on the road, or if they do, they're okay, but I witnessed them too, and I see a different story. So that's why it's important to me that we make a fair plan with the least amount of impact, and there's never going to be a situation where nobody's impacted, because then we won't have something new. So that's what I have to say.
So a couple of comments. First, there's no cost, in my opinion, that's too high to ensure safety. So whether the state funds it, TIP funds it, the town funds it, I don't think cost should be a concern. We have a very large neighborhood that does not have safe access now. So I think all the steps that have been taken so far have increased the chances of having a safer route for all of those residents to go on. I also want to point out that it is a scenic road, and the plans will be brought before the planning board for scenic road review. Every stone wall will be looked at, every tree that has to be removed that's over 4 inches wide will be looked at, and there'll be an assessment made there. There was a hearing for the Downey Street sidewalk, and a lot of people were very concerned about the loss of trees that many trees had to be taken down to implement that sidewalk. There were a lot of people that were very concerned about the loss of tree canopy. And if you drive down Downey Street now, I think it's really hard to make that argument that it wasn't a beneficial project. So we now have a safer route for kids to get to the Downey School and get home from the Downey School until they get to Canton Street. And then we no longer have it. So it can be done safely, it can be done aesthetically, and I think we're moving in the right direction. One other thing I want to point out, the view that shows the no buffer, where the sidewalk comes right between the road and the stone wall. An example that's very similar to that is on Clabbertree Street. So Brendan and Todd, I don't know if you remember the width of that sidewalk, maybe 5.5 by Zavarian?
Yeah, probably about 5.5.
5.5. So this would be 2.5 feet wider, smaller than the width of this table, wider than what we have on Clabbertree. So if you want to take a look at what's there, you'll have a good impression of what this portion that doesn't have a buffer would look like. I prefer to see a buffer in all lengths of it, wherever it can be. I think it provides an enhanced feeling of safety as you're on the sidewalk, and it's more aesthetically pleasing. But if it's more important to stop the intrusion into closer to someone's home, but still within the right of way, and you give up the buffer, then at least we have something to compare it to see what that looks like.
Is it worth it to look at the option of where you could incorporate a buffer, where you had the frontage that wouldn't be as impactful? You would have the opportunity with rock walls that it wouldn't.
That's exactly what would happen in the next wave if this is going forward.
Right, so that's completely, that's not ruled out by any means, but you could
Absolutely.
meander this to have a buffer and
That's
what you
why we're showing a sample with a buffer and a sample without. The hope would be to have as much buffering as we can, but that's when you're gonna find out the value of the wall versus the value of the buffer. But we're just not there.
In addition, as the plans advance, there's an opportunity to look at each of the large trees that are slated for removal, and in some cases, there might be a possibility of bending around those trees. So, nothing's off the table other than the size of the right-of-way, of the actual pavement that's needed.
Did you want to say something, or should we go there?
Actually, I'll just make a quick comment. I just want to say two things. Number one, you're welcome, sir. And if anyone else can't hear, please raise your hand as we go along. It's so important that everybody hears. The first thing I want to say is how impressed I am with this process. And I want to thank the people who reached out to me a year ago, people like Gary and Steve, who wanted some public process around this. And we listened and we formed this group. And it has been just, I think, a tremendous conversation that we've had. I have listened, I have heard about the problems on Canton Street with the volume, the traffic, the speeds, all of these incidents that so many of you have talked about, how unsafe it is, people who can't go to see their friends just from door to door on the street. And as has been said here, you know, from where I sit on the select board, my number one priority has to be the safety of people in this town. Number one. That has to be my job as I look at it, in my opinion. That is my major job. That's why we're going to be talking about the fire station. It's about safety and keeping people safe. And as part of that is access and sustainability of this town. So this town, people can come and live here safely in the future. And thinking about our most vulnerable residents, our kids, our elderly, people who have disabilities. And we've got to make the entire town safe for all of us. So that is where I am coming from, and I'm just so pleased and grateful for all of the work that everyone here has done. So thank you.
Thank you. Maureen, everyone has spoken.
Yeah, I just have two comments. One is there are 9 historical homes on Canton Street. And I think probably,
Speak up.
am I not loud enough? That's unusual.
No, I could hear you, that was good.
Oh.
I saw someone else doing like that.
So I just would really, I think having those 9 historical homes on the street, plus the 2 that are in Everett, there should be some advice or maybe some input from the Historical Commission about their thoughts of maybe what the town should be doing to preserve those homes in particular. Because I do realize a few of them, they are like so close to the street, and if you are going to be taking down the walls and the trees in front of those homes, that's just part of the history of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there ought to be some, I don't know whether DOT has any say in like historical properties and what they should or should not do surrounding those. Are these people also grandfathered in to something so that their property should not be impacted as much? I don't know. But those are just one of the questions. I think there should be some input from the Historical Commission. We have emailed them, and no response. And a few other people here have too, like the residents that own those homes. A response would be nice, just to say, okay, you know. And the other thing is about the crosswalks. Those are supposed to be, like, there's a volume that they recommend. There are guidelines for these raised crosswalks. There is a volume and a speed that they recommend the street have, like less than like 9,000 cars per day, and the speed limit less than 30. And they also says you should have input from the neighbors because they are very noisy to the places where they will be placed. So I think that ought to have some looking at. Maybe those have to be changed to something else, like leave the islands in, throw in a few more islands, put in a few speed bumps. There are all sorts of ways besides putting in, it looks nice, but there are guidelines out there. I think from either the FHWA or somebody else. And it tells you the cost of each one of them are between $7,000 and $30,000. And I guess it depends, I don't know what it depends on.
Maureen, I want to ask Nora to maybe address your question on the historical.
Sure.
Yes, so my first question is who you've reached out to on the Historical Commission.
Everyone on the commission.
So the Historical Commission hasn't met in some time because they don't have a quorum of members right now. So there's the Historical Commission and there's the Historical Society.
Commission.
The commission.
Commission's mail comes to me and I have not received anything. So unless you've reached out to their personal email addresses of the few members that are remaining, the select board is looking to,
I think we reached out to the administrator.
There's
I
actually.
I am the administrator and I
There's
have not
actually
received anything.
I think there
There's
is
a
a
link.
link
There's a
that you
link.
click on and then you
Send an
send
email.
an email. And that is what, and I
They haven't,
also.
they haven't come, so I will check on that tomorrow to see why, but I have received no request for the Historical Commission.
And then I also got another email from Tish for, I do believe Nancy Donahue is the chair, am I correct?
Nancy Donahue was the chair the
Okay.
last time the commission met. They have not met, I believe, in over a year because they do not have a quorum and they're not able to meet. So there have been people who have left the commission over the years, and there's been an ongoing request for volunteers to serve on the commission. So if anyone is
Oh.
interested, please send your information to the select board for consideration. And I'll look into if there's a problem with the link, but the lack of response is because there has been no receipt of the emails. So I will check on that. The Historical Commission has a very, very prescribed role in the town.
Advisory, yeah.
And it does not include the review of historic homes.
Correct.
Unless those homes are slated for demolition.
Right.
So they really wouldn't have authority
Mhm.
to act. We also do not have any restrictions on historic homes other than a demolition delay bylaw. So that really wouldn't come into play here either. I think the scenic road restriction on the town is the more significant one. There is no historical restriction, other than not being able to demolish a home immediately if it was built before 1910. Also, I would point out that the work is now all within the right-of-way, so there is no impact to a property that has a historic home on it. There's an impact to the road in front of that property.
The frontage, yeah.
Not the home frontage,
Right,
the
well-
area in front of the property within the right-of-way. So I don't think that the state review would come into play on that as well, because you're not entering the property that has a historic home on it.
Do you have any other comment?
No, it's just
Okay, thank
crosswalks
you.
too.
Tom, do you have anything to add? Or?
I'll just add a little personal anecdote here, experience. Marianne, you had talked about connecting Westwood and sort of putting the grid together more comprehensive. I have a 8-year-old daughter, and we bike from where we live near Gay Street on Pine Lane to University Station, and we go down Pine Lane, East Street, Smith Drive or Smith Road, up the new Canton Street where there's a sidewalk.
Downey Street.
Downey Street.
Downey, sorry, Blue Hill Drive with the bike. The only section that we do not have sidewalks in the 3.5 miles from my house to Wegmans is on Canton Street. And we go on there and we have to navigate it. And she goes first and I go second and I try to take the lane and then we have to turn left on the Blue Hill Drive. How? What's that? No, it has dedicated bike paths. Yeah. So it's the only area in 3.5 miles that doesn't have any accommodation whatsoever. Why there's such resistance, especially with this plan, that I feel like there's still resistance with it. Maybe there's not. Makes me wonder what an ideal plan is. Or is it just people don't care about other people and how they get around?
No, that's not.
No,
And-
that is true.
well,
That's
I'm not-
That's
no,
an unfair
look.
statement. That's a callous, unfair statement, I'm sorry.
Let's not go back
That's
and
not true.
forth.
Okay. But I do feel like there are people, and we'll probably hear it in public comments, who don't want anything done. Nothing done. Canton Street's awesome the way it is. There's no room for improvement, and that just blows my mind. Again, I think this is a project many, many generations. Not just now, not just the next 10 years, but this is something that could be around for our grandkids or great-grandkids who live in Westwood or other families that come. So, I don't even know what work remains. It's not clear to me. We've come a long way. What else would we need to change at this point for the select board to evaluate it and say, we're behind it or we're not? I mean, this could be endless work. I mean, we could talk 5.5, 8-foot aesthetics. As Grace mentioned, it's very subjective. I like an urban look. I think it's functional. You throw that in front of my house, I'll take it any day. But You know, I just don't know when we're finished, when we hit a milestone where people say, we're good. I think we're good now. I think I could walk out of this meeting today and say, we got something that's good enough. People have made public comment at all of these meetings, and some of them haven't changed their tune at all despite all the changes. And there's a lot of people out there who want to see this process play out and then make a decision. So that's all I have to.
Let me just make one comment, because you said something that you preempted me a little bit, but I just want to say, one request I have for our group is to please, in the next 24 or 48 hours, please send to the BOS at Westwood, whatever, please send any suggestions you have that you think we ought to consider before we get to another meeting. But to Tom's point, my sense is that we are pretty well as far as we can go in this advisory process. Our next meeting is to hear public comment and to probably wrap up this process. So with that, we have one more person.
I'd like to.
Wait a minute, let me get around to everyone.
Oh, I got no comments, Steve.
Okay.
I'd just like to respond to a couple comments made here by the board. In terms of frontage and right-of-way, a lot of these homes, the right-of-way's been there, but no one really knew where the right-of-way was. They've maintained it. It's part of their home and the look and feel. So people have maintained the stone walls, they've maintained the yards, they've maintained the aesthetics, and to have something this large put in is obtrusive, and there's a reaction to that. That's one. Number two is, no one is against the sidewalk. And the reason there's a lot of visceral reaction was that this was positioned as a sidewalk project. In the warrant articles, it was said it was a sidewalk. It wasn't a sidewalk. It was a massive, massive project. And that got everyone upset. There's a level of distrust that was created of how the town proceeded with this project. And we're trying to recover from that distrust and build a trust. But that mistrust is still there. And that needs to be recognized, because there was a lot of, it was just thrown upon us as the residents. And I don't know if you went to the meeting a year ago, there was a vehement response to that original 25% plan. And Steve, you were, there as well.
That's right.
So there's a lot of history that needs to be overcome. And no one is against safety for the town. A lot of people that I spoke to, there are some people that don't want anything, but most of the people opposed to the project were not opposed to a sidewalk. What they don't want is an urban design. So let's not divide the town of people that don't want safety for their children. That's a very egregious statement to make, and I think we should stop doing that. That's dividing the town unnecessarily.
Thank you for thank everyone for the comments. We have 5 minutes and we have to decide on the next meeting. So let me say that it doesn't appear we're going to have public comment tonight, but the entire purpose of our next meeting is to have public comment. And at suggestions, we're going to start a little later because it's hard for people to get here by 6. We would like for the working group, the most probable date we could get is October 7th, where we could start at 7 o'clock. Could you take a quick look to see if you are available? And the purpose of our next meeting is to have public comment and then to see if we have a consensus, if this is the end of this process, to turn it back to the select board.
How long would that meeting be?
It will be, we're trying to pick a time that if we have to go to 9 o'clock, we'll be here doing it.
I think you need to do a little presentation, then have public comment.
Yeah, that's exactly what, well, that's what we'll do. But I'm saying, we're not, the focus is public comment more than.
And really what we want to do is encourage people to watch our meetings, watch this meeting in advance, so they will have that basis of information.
So how many of you are available October 7th?
That's Monday. It's a Monday.
It's a Monday,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I can make it.
It looks like we have a consensus.
Great. It's wonderful.
So, Tish, Can we try to get October 7th? Can I
Steve,
throw
can I
a
make
couple other?
recommendation, Steve?
What?
I would recommend that we have it at a larger.
Oh, we are. We're
facility.
moving it.
We're on
We're
that.
not going to do it through here. Thank you. Will you just quickly look to see if October 22nd or October 23rd would be available as backups? And we don't know if those are even available yet, but we were trying to do October 7th. We think we can lock that down.
Where were you going to try to hold it then?
It'll be,
Either at Pine Hill or the Little Theater. I think Pine Hill would be bigger.
There's not a lot of parking there, I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay, that's a good consideration.
Parking is tricky.
We tried Downey first, but that is not good for Westwood Media Center. I guess it's poor audio. So that was our first choice, but that's a very good point about, we'd have to look into that. So we'll look at parking. We want to get the biggest, most accessible spot.
What was the other
High-
option?
Well, the Little Theater, I just want to check the capacity. It's not huge, the Little Theater, and I'm not sure
we
that.
got the message.
We'll get it.
We got the
We'll get the
message.
biggest we can and the most accessible.
The most important thing is we got people who are available. We got a quorum.
That's great.
So
So is it 10/7?
10/7 at 7.
10/7 at 7.
And then the next date was what?
And what was the other
Right now,
option?
we're going to go for that. The other two that look like we might be able to, is either the 22nd or 23rd.
23rd is preferable for me?
Well, do me a favor, I'm going to ask everyone in the group to send an email
All right.
and do two things. If there's anything else you think we ought to look at on the plan, please let us know, or say you don't have something, and then just confirm whether the 7th, the 22nd, or 23rd are all still good.
Sending that to- Who
Pardon?
would you want that sent to you?
The BOS
Oh,
at
the boss, okay.
Westwood dot,
Oh, you don't.
okay, it's BOS at Westwood dot, ma.us.
No.
Oh, Town Hall dot west,
It's, yes. Let
say it again.
let me say the email again so everybody has it. It's bos@townhall.westwood.ma.us. So if you have any comments or suggestions for our next meeting, or you just want to give us comments to consider, or if there are folks you know who can't come to that meeting, please ask them to send their comments to us. And again, that will be on the Canton Street Working Group page on the town website.
And I wish we had more time tonight.
I find it very interesting that you've not talked at all about the data that's included in the beta report.
Can you say again?
The traffic study?
Yeah. I mean, and that picture up there on the screen, man, that's crying for the data out of the beta. Unbelievable. I mean, that's a speedway you got up there now.
So we will talk about that at the final meeting. Thank you for suggesting that. And with that, I want to say, I know people want to speak. We had a very short meeting time frame tonight. We said up front that we may not be able to accommodate it. We will turn our attention to public comment at the next meeting. With that, do we have to ask for a vote to adjourn, or how's it work?
Probably should.
Okay, a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you,
Any
everyone.
against? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.
Yeah.